Well, good morning. Another week in the House has passed with Democrats kind of fixing more of their mistakes from the previous session. The majority of, or the biggest story of this week was the school lunch bill that was passed out of the House. Passed the House unanimously. That same bill was brought up a year ago as an amendment by a Republican and was voted down by the Democrats. So, obviously, we think it's a good policy. We thought it was a good policy a year ago, and we're glad that Democrats have now seen the light on that issue, and glad that we were able to have a bipartisan bill to fix that problem. So. Last week we saw the tax bill come through the House. Obviously, again, the same example. A year ago, Democrats put these tax policies in place. Republicans voted against those policies a year ago. Our opinion then was they weren't needed, and I think Democrats are figuring out in an election year how bad those policies are for Minnesotans and frankly how unpopular they are. So glad that we could also have a very bipartisan bill to fix those mistakes as well. Coming up very quickly is the MNsure enrollment deadline. I think March 31st is the end of the opportunity to get into MNsure. We found out earlier this week that the number of people enrolling in the commercial side of MNsure is drastically below what was originally projected. These are the concerns that we have been raising now since the bill was passed. The original estimate was 177,000 people into MNsure on the commercial side. Right now we're at 19% of that number. And we have said all along that the real problem with MNsure is if the numbers aren't right going in, it's going to throw off the calculations and send the rates through the roof. So we're predicting that without the legislature taking action to make some fixes to repair the problems, that MNsure Minnesotans will likely see higher rate increases than they've already seen. So we're certainly concerned about that. Also, the penalty for families that they'll have to pay if they don't get insurance through MNsure, $285 is sneaking up as well. We don't think that that's the right move to be penalizing people if they're not liking the plans in MNsure or can't afford the higher rates through MNsure. Penalizing families is certainly not the right approach. So, but Minnesotans will continue to live with MNsure, and frankly, we hope Democrats don't continue to put their head in their sand and pretend like this isn't their problem. So, and with that, I'll turn it over to Senator Hann.
All right, thank you. Good morning. I think it's still morning. The clock fell, I think. So we appreciate the comments from Representative Dowd. From our perspective, there hasn't been a whole lot of activity in the Senate side this week that is really the high priority things that we think we ought to do. So in thinking about, well, what do we talk about today, I thought what we could talk about are the top 10 Democrat unsession items that are things from the first half of this session, things that we did last year. So number 10 on that list is the warehouse tax. Obviously, that was a good idea last year. Apparently, it's not such a good idea this year. Number 9, the telecommunications tax, same thing. Good idea last year. Let's undo it this year. Number 8, the equipment repair tax. Great idea last year. Not so much this year. Number 7, the death tax. Wasn't a good idea last year. Good idea this year. Tax conformity. Not a good idea last year. Good idea this year. The gift ban for legislators. That was a good idea last year, but maybe in an election year, not so much. Fixing the school lunch program, as Representative Dowd said. Wasn't a good idea last year, but maybe a good idea this year. The legislative office building was a great idea last year. I don't know, doesn't seem to be such a good idea this year, kind of bogged down. And of course, the 5% campaign wasn't a good idea last year, but I guess this year it is a good idea. And of course, the number one thing that the Democrats plan to unsession this year is the law requiring the Commissioner of Agriculture to round up wild boars running loose in the streets of St. Paul. And that was okay last year, but we're going to undo it. You know what? That's the one thing we probably shouldn't undo, because I've been around here for 10 years. I've seen no boars running around the streets. It's working. Why would we want to undo that and run the risk of having boars running around? So we think this is the biggest collective flip-flop in Minnesota history. Those things that were all unsatisfactory in the first half of the session are now on the table. All the things that Republicans were advocating for last year are all of a sudden good ideas in an election year. You can draw your own conclusions. A couple other things I want to comment on. The tax bill schedule. The House sent over a message. We tried and failed to bring that up for a vote. We think that the governor has made the point that many Minnesotans will be harmed by uncertainty if these tax issues are not addressed in a timely fashion. He set a date of March 19th. I think from the previous comments that you heard from Senator Skoye and Senator Hayden, that's unlikely to occur. We think that that's unfortunate. We think there needs to be more alacrity in their willingness to pass that, and obviously there's going to be differences. I have yet to hear any Senate DFL leader say that they want to repeal the business-to-business sales taxes, the warehouse, communications, and equipment repair. I have not heard anybody publicly say that they want to do that. So we're waiting to see what the tax bill that does come out later this week or next week is going to do. And secondly, just a comment on the minimum wage. And as Senator Hayden talked about, there was an amendment to the bill to add the minimum wage, in effect, the $9.50 rate, into the nursing home formula. I think just to correct, we are tied to the federal rate reimbursement. We don't have to be. We have rate equalization in this state. We're one of only 2 states in the country that does that. We have tried in the past when we were in the majority to repeal that. And if we did do that, that would certainly be of help. But I will give credit to Senator Hayden for some intellectual honesty in that by putting that increase in cost into nursing homes, they also included an increase in revenue or to pay for that. And the point really is, if you're going to mandate that 54% increase in cost to labor to small businesses across the state, where is that money going to come from? They're not going to come to the legislature and ask for a bill to be passed to pay those increasing costs. So I think it does point out that even some Democrats recognize that when you pass that high rate increase, somebody's going to pay for it. In the case of nursing homes, we understand that we have to pay for that, but what about all the other businesses? Where are they going to get that money? And I have not heard anybody yet address that. They all seem to think that this money is going to appear out of nowhere and that there's going to be more money in the pockets of low-income earners, but it's not going to have any effect on pricing, any effect on employment, any effect on anything else. I think that is disingenuous. So with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
What's your response to your Democratic colleagues saying that the reason why MSOP is not being done is because your caucus hasn't presented any viable options?
Well, you know, this is something that's been going around a little bit lately. I understand the governor made a similar comment that somehow the problem here is House Republicans. You know, House Republicans' priority is keeping Minnesotans safe. You know, we actually agree with the commissioner of DHS and with the Attorney General that the current program is constitutional. And I know that ultimately this will work its way through the court systems, and a judge will make that decision ultimately. But we agree with the commissioner and the Attorney General that it is constitutional. You know, it's funny, House Democrats haven't moved very far from their position of wanting a less restrictive alternative for the current population. And that's not in the Senate bill. You know, there's some discussion of what that might look like in the Senate bill, but that's not actually in the Senate bill. So it seems in the discussions we've had, and House Republicans have been at the table in discussions with the leadership and the governor on this issue numerous times, it seems like those discussions have been centered around the House Democrats' position that they don't seem willing to move from. So, you know, we'll be at the table if they want to continue discussion, but it's unfortunate, you know, they were elected to lead, and, you know, frankly, it's up to them, I think, to put a proposal on the table that would earn bipartisan support. And so far they have failed to do that.
So are you saying you like the current system?
You know, I'm not saying that the current system couldn't use some changes, but I think one of the sticking points for House Republicans is that current population, and moving them into a less restrictive alternative. We do believe that the current system of treatment for that current population is constitutional, but I do think we could make some adjustments. I think there's probably too many people going into that population because there aren't other avenues on the front end, and those are things that I think we can talk about, and I think there would be broad bipartisan support for some of those kinds of things, but it seems that House Democrats are stuck on where they want to end and really aren't willing to compromise at this point.
Representative Dowd, it doesn't matter what you believe, it matters what the judge believes, and he's saying this is, it's not constitutional, he's concerned about it. So are you still saying that you think, despite the judges saying he doesn't think this is constitutional, that it is?
Well, and I haven't read the actual decision, but I don't think the judge, no, I haven't. But I don't think the judge specifically said it's not constitutional. I think he dismissed the motions and said that it's up to the other side to prove their case that it is not constitutional. So he's allowing that to move forward, but I don't think he's come out at this point and said it is not constitutional.
Draconian, I think he said it said severe problems. But you're insisting still that it meets constitutional muster.
And as I said, and the Attorney General has said, and the DHS Commissioner has said that it is constitutional. And we think that the program is constitutional, but we're certainly willing to come to the table and work with Democrats to find a solution. But they seem stuck on wanting to let the current population out. Let's remember that these people are defined as predatory sex offenders. And our priority in the Republican caucus is keeping Minnesotans safe. So
If they let all these people out, as the judge has threatened to do, then what?
well, the judge has
You don't do anything.
I don't think we're getting to that point. For this case to proceed, it's going to take some time, and I hope we can actually come to some agreement this session on a bipartisan basis about how to handle this situation, and I think we can. Unfortunately, Democrats haven't seemed to move at all from their position. When we do meet, they want to convince us that that's the right course of action. So I think there's still some disagreement on that, but we're happy to come to the table and work with them as we have on every issue. Well, we haven't met now for 3 or 4 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, something like that. I guess I could look. Yeah, since before session.
Representative Dowd, just so we're clear, if your main priority as Republicans is to keep Minnesotans safe, and yet one of the options the judge has before him is to release these patients, then wouldn't that mean that Minnesotans are not safe?
Well, I'm not sure that is the case. In other states where the judge has intervened, they've come in and taken over the program. It doesn't mean that they've necessarily just released everybody. And I think that's that. I don't want that to become a scare tactic that a judge is going to come in and just release everybody in the program. I don't think that's something that's likely to happen. So.
Hasn't the judge actually said that?
Maybe you know more about this.
I don't think that the judge has said he would release everybody. I think he's raised some questions. I guess in this whole debate, there are a couple of things. And when we were in the majority, Senator Limmer and I, we visited Moose Lake and St. Peter, and we tried to work with Senator Berglund at the time and others, and we tried to look at this problem, and it's a very difficult problem. And there's problems on the front end of who gets admitted, and there's problems on what you do with the people who are currently there, and they're not necessarily the same problem, and it is going to be difficult. We're not going to solve it all in 1 year. I think, is there room to take some steps to at least let the court know that we are taking it seriously, and I believe people are. But one thing that has been a little bit remarkable to me is I have not yet heard the governor come in and say, here's what we think we need to do. Here is the path forward. Here is the things I want the legislature to do. Here is the recommendations in legislation that would solve this problem, and take some leadership and advocate for getting it done. I think we did have a bill in the Senate last year that I think I was a co-author on. I believe I voted for it. Senator Limmer did. It was very modest. It was looking at doing some things to develop recommendations for possible release, and it was a fairly modest step actually, and that got bogged down in the House, and for whatever reason nothing was done. But I don't think the problem is going to get solved. I do think it requires some leadership, frankly, from the governor to say, here's what I think the people of Minnesota want, and here's the way forward, and let's get together and do it.
Did the governor actually try to do something by the planned release of this one offender as a way forward to start doing this? And the first thing that happened was a Republican candidate for governor said that he is betraying the victims.
Well, I think everybody has their opinion, but the governor's the governor. And I don't know that what he was doing was so much a reform as doing what he thought the current law suggested he should do, and the fact that he didn't follow through, or what. I think that those are questions for the governor, more for me, I guess. But I do think that on this kind of an issue, you do need to have some leadership from the governor. I think it's been lacking. He hasn't said, here is the bill that we need to have. I want Republicans and Democrats to get together and figure out how to do this. Well, I don't know what he believes. I don't know what he thinks the path forward is. I don't know if he thinks that the Texas model is the right way, or the Wisconsin model, or some other model. I have no idea. He said, let's just all get together and talk about it. okay, we've been doing that, but I don't know what he has in mind. I don't know what is acceptable to him. I think on this kind of issue, this is where you need executive leadership, and I think it's lacking. The other comment I'd make is I was here and heard the previous comments from the majority about how necessary this is to be bipartisan, and I don't disagree with that. It is an important issue, but it's amazing to me that things like MNsure, which also, big deal, affecting all kinds of people, no bipartisanship there, not necessary. We can do it. We're the majority. We can shove this through and get it done, and everybody can suffer the consequence. We don't need any advice from you minority folks. But now all of a sudden on this issue, there is no leadership. There is no, here's the path forward. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to solve the problem. I think that's remarkable.
You just criticized the governor for lack of leadership. Do you think it's a problem that he hasn't been at the Capitol as he's been recovering at home?
Well, no, I don't think that you have to physically be here to lead. I understand he's got some medical issues, and I wish him well, and I don't think that those issues are taking him away from his ability. As he's pointed out, the problem is in his hip, not his head, so I don't think that the fact he's not here should have anything to do with his ability to provide leadership on an issue like this. He could certainly sit down with his commissioners, and I met with Commissioner Jessen, develop a plan, say here's what we'd like to see the legislature do, put out an outline, ask for it to be done, call on legislators on both sides to enact it, and do the things that governors do when they want to get something done, and that's what's been missing.
Are you folks meeting with him next week?
I think we're going to meet with them about some kind of stadium thing, but I'm not aware that we have anything on this issue.
You haven't met with him since the session?
Pardon me?
You haven't met with him since the session
No,
started?
I think some of the health issues he's had, we did meet last year pretty regularly, about once a week, and I think that, frankly, it's just because of his recovering from the surgery that has...
Let DFL leaders meet with him.
Well, we're not DFL leaders, so I guess, I don't know. But we have not been asked to meet with the governor. We have met with members of his staff, of course, and commissioners, so.
It seems like everybody's coming around to the conformity idea in Democratic leaders in both houses, but there seems to be sort of a snag up on the repeal of the business-to-business taxes.
Right.
What do you think it means if that's not able to get done this session?
I think it's a big fail if we don't get that done. We talked about this last year. Right after session, people started talking about it. It was a big point of discussion before the special session. You had all kinds of people, governor, Democrat leaders, certainly us on the Republican side, saying this is a priority. You've got businesses across the state talking about this, how important this is. Everybody said, well, if there were reserve monies available, this is certainly going to be something we're going to get done. I mean, they basically said, if we have reserve monies to do this, it will be done. Build it and they will come. Have the reserves, we'll get this done. And they're not doing it. And I think the House, to their credit, they did pass a bill that was a repeal. And I don't remember if it was a retroactive or not. I can't recall. Maybe it wasn't. But we would favor retroactive repeal. But I think, again, from the Senate side, there's been no public statement by any DFL Senate leader to say, we should repeal these. We're working on repealing them. It is a top priority for us. Instead, we've heard, well, we want to do minimum wage. We want to do some tax conformity. And tax conformity, we agree. I think there's been talk about gift tax, we agree, but nothing about business to business, and I think that's remarkable as well.
Question
Go ahead.
about jobs. Yesterday, the governor reported that the workforce in Minnesota is larger than ever before. The jobs lost in the recent recession have now been completely recovered, and then some. Unemployment rate down. Would you talk a little bit about where you think this is? Do you agree with these numbers, and are the jobs that are being created good ones?
Well, I haven't looked at the material the governor is referring to, but I would say my sense is, from talking to people, I think the economy is recovering. I think there has been job growth. I don't think there's dispute about that. I think Minnesota never was as deeply in the recession as other states, and that's encouraging, and we're happy to see that. And the question really is, going forward, what can we do to continue to create the climate that will foster further private sector investment in our economy, rather than doing things that make us an outlier compared to other states around us or around the world. Those are things that we're troubled with. Some of the policies that are being advocated for seem to us to be job killers rather than things that are going to help create a strong economy.
Do you all support the NFL tax breaks that are being discussed for a Super Bowl?
We have not had conversations about that yet. It's just, kind of been floated to us recently, and we understand that we may be invited to a meeting next week to talk about it. So I don't know exactly what the proposals are right now, and what we would need to do. I understand there's something already in statute as far as the tickets are concerned, and I understand there's likely a couple of other little things that the NFL would want in order to draw a Super Bowl here. So it sounds like we'll start those conversations with the majority next week.
What's your sense of this, of that? Go ahead.
Well, I have not seen any specific proposal either, but I have heard the same thing, that there are some things that we put into statute with, I think, the World Series or something that would have a bearing on this that meet some of the NFL conditions. I think the things that they are asking for in addition, and I, again, have not seen any numbers, but were described to me as being fairly modest in terms of what the expense, quote unquote, would be. Their tax reductions of various kinds. I think they have to do with ticket sales or something. And I haven't seen it, and we haven't had any conversations with the governor's office about it. And so we need to wait and see what that looks like. Again, my opinion is if we agree that cutting taxes on things is good for business and good for the economy, which is what the NFL is saying, gee, why don't we do it across the board? Why don't we just cut those sales taxes for the whole city of Minneapolis or St. Paul or whatever? And why don't we do that and just make it a broad-based tax relief? Is that it?
Where are you both at in medical marijuana?
You know, I think this is an issue that's has bipartisan support and bipartisan opposition. I think last week we kind of learned that it wasn't going to go anywhere, and now yesterday the governor made some statements that mean that maybe they're back at the table discussing it. I personally haven't been real keen on it. I think there's some issues that would need to be worked out in the current bill. I don't think that I would support, but we'll see how it works through the process. We certainly do have strong advocates in my caucus, and I do have people that have strong concerns about it as well. So we're interested to watch how it works through the process.
Well, and I heard something, and I hope I'm not misquoting, but I heard that the governor is essentially saying we have a distribution system and it's working, so maybe we should just let things go. But this bill was before the Senate a couple of years ago. That bill, I think it's different than the one that's currently being talked about. I did not support that bill, and I think that and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I think that's very likely that there could be a medical benefit to marijuana. The real questions come down to, and they've talked about a little bit about law enforcement concerns, but there are other concerns, is the best way to decide what is an appropriate medicine to take it to a legislative committee where nobody has any real expertise, knowledge, or experience to decide that and rely on anecdotal evidence, or do you let something like the FDA, which we rely on for every other medication? We have opioids, for example, that are naturally grown, but we don't let people grow them in their backyard and decide how much they're going to take to take care of their problems. I think that on this issue, we have to decide what is the process that we're going to use. If we don't think the FDA is right, okay, where does that put us? Or if we think this should be done just statewide by state, I have real concerns for that process and the kinds of positions it puts pharmacists and medical professionals in, as well as public health issues. And so there are issues around this bill that haven't been adequately addressed, and that's why I opposed it before. I think that's possible that those issues could get addressed, and if they were, then it would be a different story. But so far, I don't think we've seen that bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.